Welcome, everybody. I have here with me Otangelo Grasso. Yep, I got the point right. Otangelo Grasso, he's from Brazil, and we're going to do SE kind of conversations, although I'm not going to hold him to my standards at all for doing SE, where he's going to make a claim for the first half of the show, and I'll interview him on his claim. And in the second half of the show, I'll make a similar obverse claim, and he'll interview me. During the middle of all that, we can also entertain the audience's comments and questions, so long as it's not taking the interviewer off their course. Otangelo, tell me something about yourself. Tell my people.
Yes, hello everyone. So for who doesn't know me yet, I think I'm already well known amongst the YouTube community, atheist community and so forth. I'm actually not Brazilian. I live in Brazil, but I was born and grew up in Switzerland from Italian parents. And I converted to receive Christ as Lord and Savior when I was 18. So I'm 37 years now on that path, and I am used to have conversations. Yeah, so I'm
just
used to have.
That's cool. Congratulations. You're now more theist than you weren't.
Oh, sure, yeah. And I'm used to have conversations with atheists about these topics of origins and God and theism, atheism, science, and so forth. Yeah, so that's basically it. And I have, I think you've put it in the description. I have two YouTube channels. One is the God Talk. The other is Intelligent Design Academy. And I have also a virtual library where I collect information which I make public in regards of various topics, science, philosophy, Christianity, theism, astronomy, evolution, intelligent design, creationism, and so forth.
Cool. I welcome you to jump into your presentation. Do you have anything that you want to say before I share your screen?
No, you can pull it right up and I'll start it. Okay, so in this debate, I will expose why I believe that God with high certainty exists and that it is the God of the Bible, and why I am 100% confident and sure about this. I believe that the value of beauty is transcendental and grounded in God. Where does that sense come from? We take it as a given. Can you explain why Da Vinci's Mona Lisa is beautiful? She sits on a relaxed pose, smiling with an air of mystery. Or a paradise bird, which is characterized by its exuberant colors. We can recognize the beauty and appreciate it. I contest that anyone would call the bird of paradise or the Mandarin duck ugly. I think there is objective beauty recognized by anyone. We know how to appreciate the sense of glory as brightness, splendor, and luminosity. C.S. Lewis wrote, "We do not want merely to see beauty, tough. We want something else which can hardly be put in words, to be united with the beauty we see, to pass into it, to receive it to ourselves, to bathe in it, to become part of it." Someone called the argument from beauty one of the greatest non-biological hints for the fact that our universe is a product of mind. And truth exists because God exists. There are 4 preconditions that have to be met to be able to make truth claims. 1, we need to be able to use comprehensible language. 2, logic that is coherent. 3, senses that we can trust. 4, and the world out there that corresponds to reality, which is intelligible and which we are capable to understand. We need to be able to use language. Truth is an attribute of propositions, and propositions are by definition linguistic. They are statements made in a particular language which is based on rules. A collection of words has a meaning which is assigned to them. Matter through evolutionary change has never been observed to create something in essence different than physical. A concept, an idea, an instruction manual, a blueprint using the laws of language. Syntax, which is the rules of grammar, semantics, which conveys meaning, pragmatics, which is the know-how to apply and respond to the message. An AI robot will never transition from a pre-programmed state following instructions given by an intelligent person that he simply executes based on the pre-established algorithm to actually starting to comprehend what he's saying or doing. There is a deep gap or qualia or quality. Matter and mind are two distinct things. If a statement is true, then it is true. A thing is itself. It is not something else. This is also known respectively as the law of identity. Then we have the law of non-contradiction and the law of the excluded middle. But what is the nature of a law or logic? Laws of logic are abstract and conceptual. They are not physical. They are not made of atoms, and therefore you cannot see, taste, or touch them. Laws of logic are universal, invariant, abstract rules of thought that govern all correct reasoning. Laws of logic are abstract, meaning they exist in the mind. An abstract principle is one that exists in the mind, but which has no physical substance. You can think a law of logic, but you cannot touch one. Laws of logic do not change with time. They are invariant. If thought and logic come from proteins, chemicals, and neurons, then laws of logic would be different for everybody since no one has the same chemical and neurological patterns. How is it that matter created minds that started to comprehend math and calculus and language using the laws of logic, abstract thought, and beauty, able to start thinking? How is it that thought became independent from proteins, chemicals, and neurons? Math, calculus, and the laws of logic do not change, but neurons do all the time. Logic presupposes God because it assumes that there are true, immaterial, unchanging, good, universal, and knowable laws that govern thought and speech. The Bible says that the Word was God. He created us in His image, so we can also think and speak logically. Matter cannot ground logic, but God can. We believe and presuppose that our senses are basically reliable and we can draw correct conclusions about the universe. Unless the source of our own reliable senses is not as well reliable, unchanging in nature, how can chaos and unreliability be the source of reliable senses? We are warranted to expect that our memory and senses are reliable since they have been designed by God, as stated in Scripture. God created us in His image, and since He is the supreme intelligence and all-knowing, we are justified to believe that we have been created by God, able to gain knowledge and to reason. If our thoughts were chaotic and random, not using logic and rationality, we would not be able to make sense of anything that happens in the universe at all. God created us in His image, and since He is the supreme intelligence and all-knowing, we are justified to believe that we have been created by God, able to gain knowledge and to reason. If our thoughts were chaotic and random, not using logic and rationality, we would not be able to make sense of anything that happens in the universe at all. Einstein said that the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. I want to know how God created this world. I want to know his thoughts. The rest are details. We are in the position of a little child entering a huge library filled with books in many languages. The child knows someone must have written those books. It does not know how. It does not understand the languages in which they are written. The child's dimly suspects a mysterious order in the arrangement of the books, but doesn't know what it is. That, it seems to me, is the attitude of even the most intelligent human being toward God. We see the universe marvelously arranged and obeying certain laws. Our limited minds have discovered the equations, the subtext upon which our universe operates. Mathematics is the true fabric of reality. Mathematicians just discover the rules of the game. The rules are embedded in everything in the known universe. Dirac wrote, God uses beautiful mathematics in creating the world. And Paul Davies, our complex universe will emerge only if the laws of physics are very close to what they are. On the left gives you a theoretical equation of the theory of everything, and on the right, the equation which gives you the brilliant mathematical encoding of nature's deep structures. These physical laws can all be written on one sheet of paper. They give both the same result. If we had to choose which of the two was more probably designed, we would go with the more parsimonious one. Only in the 20th century, it became clear that the incredibly diverse phenomena that we observe in nature are based on just this small number of physical laws, each of which may be described by a simple mathematical relationship. Each one of the fundamental laws of nature is essential for life to exist. We can discover, measure, and describe them, but not derive. They are the most basic of our world. They are not calculable from even deeper principles currently known. The constants of physics are fundamental numbers that, when plugged into the laws of physics, determine the basic structure of the universe. There is no reason why these conditions don't change unpredictably from instant to instant, or even a universe in which things pop in and out of existence. We need to presuppose and assume the uniformity of nature, that the future will be like the past. This requires stability to the universe, which depends on God, which secures the laws that govern the universe. The four fundamental forces must be secured in order there to be not to be chaos. We know that the fundamental forces do not change across the universe. The coupling constants are just right, which hold atoms together and permits them to be stable. That can only be explained by the faithful, unchanging good God of Scripture. Ironically, in order for an atheist to make a truth claim that there is no evidence for God's existence, he has to borrow from the God world, which he attempts to deny, and rely on all these: the ability to use language, logic, reliable sense perception, and the intelligible world, which he takes as an unexplained axiom. The before-mentioned constants are critical to the formation of the basic building blocks of life, and the range of possible values for these constants is very narrow, only about 1 to 5% for the combination of the constants. Now, here is another interesting fact. In order to build a car, about 30,000 parts are needed. They are all different in terms of size, material, composition, and so forth. But in life, in comparison, just 4 building blocks are used, and based on these 4 categories, all biological complexity is built. I hear from time to time that simplicity, not complexity, is the hallmark of design. I think that is what we can observe in the universe. All the awe-inspiring diversity of stars, galaxies, planets, life forms, ecology, landscapes, and so forth is built based on just 4 fundamental forces of energy, 6 fundamental mathematical equations, 4 building blocks of life, a genetic alphabet of 4 letters, and a genetic code that assigns 64 codon words to 20 amino acids. These fundamental forces must be finely adjusted to the extreme to permit life. The laws of physics must also be finely adjusted to permit carbon-based life. No DNA double helix, no life. And that depends on the hydrogen bond forces for Watson-Crick base pairing, which must also be just right. And they depend on the isomeric configuration of the nucleobases of purines and pyrimidines. There is almost an infinite number of possible setups. If we employ weightings to allow for biases in translation, then only 1 in every million random alternative codes generated is more efficient than the natural genetic code. And in 2015, a scientific investigation was performed to test 100 million different sets of 20 amino acids. They measured 3 chemical properties: size, charge, and hydrophobicity, and compared it to the standard amino acid alphabet. Only 6 are better able to explore chemistry space than the 20 amino acids that life uses. That suggests that life's set of amino acids is finely tuned 1 on part in 16 million. Atheism cannot account for the existence of beauty, truth, parsimony, nor fine-tuning. Jesus can. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father except through me."
Self back in the spot. Okay. All right. Atheism, you just listed 4 things. Could you give those the parsimony,
Fine-tuning,
fine-tuning,
and the ability to use logic,
logic,
language. Yeah.
language. Okay, atheism doesn't have good descriptions for any of those.
I've never seen any atheist provide them one. I'm here eagerly seeing if you are the first.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. Those aren't things I'm expert in. I've heard people talk about origins of language, and I'm a fan of Noam Chomsky, but I'm far from the expert. I don't know if I could give even a good summary of the science that I understand in that. Parsimony. We can't see parsimony. I don't know. I'm almost thinking, when I think of parsimony, I'm thinking Occam's razor. I'm thinking about choosing a simpler thing compared to a more complex thing, and I also recognize that sometimes that's not correct. It's like a guideline, but not a hard rule, because sometimes too much parsimony is wrong. I understand, but it's a good place to start. So I don't know how to account for parsimony. I don't know. Accounting for logic. I'm just going to try to answer the question and think that logic is about our definitions of terms. We want to call a thing, and we want to say it's specifically that thing and not just the general class of things or whatever. And that gets us down to the law of identity. So it seems like it's about definitions in language. Is there more than definitions in language that are about logic?
Well, the big problem which I see, Dali, is that matter becoming able to comprehend the laws of logic and using language, I think it is not possible. We are talking here about 3 realms of qualia, and that is basically called the hard problem of consciousness. Science doesn't have an explanation of how matter could have become conscious and starting to think, reason, using language, thinking logically, all these things.
Okay, at some point, I assume that I became conscious. I bet it was sometime after I was born, or I'm not sure when, but I became conscious. And the food that I eat became me. So I think I have one example of matter becoming conscious, but I bet you're going to say something like there was a constant through line of life from my parents to me and something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm talking about non-biological matter becoming conscious.
If I were to take distilled water, not biological, but and then like just carbon dioxide and so on, and I were to convert that into sugars and eat the sugars, would that become life stuff, but it started off sterile unlife stuff?
Well, there are well-defined definitions of what life is, and I think Paul Davies has given us a very good description. It's self-replication, it's complexity, it's hardware-software entanglement, it is adapting to the environment, it is uptaking food, it is expelling waste, and so forth. So there are well-defined things what life is, but the problem of non-biological matter becoming conscious and being able to start comprehend things, that is something which scientifically has not been explained, and that's called the hard problem of consciousness.
Right, the hard problem of consciousness. I'm going to try to approach this in steps and see where we agree. So I start with a seed, and I start with some dirt. I'm assuming the dirt's a little bit alive. It's got biology. It's got microbes in it. And I plant the seed and I provide water and sunshine. And that little tiny seed that is way less than a gram becomes a whole tree that is many more than tons. And the material that made it up all came from pretty much the air, right? The carbon that it got from the air and the sugars and the photosynthesis.
Well, of course, if you want to go
together, and the air is not alive, right?
Well, of course, if you want to go further back, then the problem already becomes how did matter become alive, and that doesn't have even to do with consciousness. And this is a big scientific problem. I am studying this stuff. I'm actually even writing a book on the origin of life, and wherever I look, there are problems.
I'm saying that there's life in that seed. Would you agree there's life in the tree seed? The tree seed is alive?
Yes, it is a living cell, yes.
And it generates 1 million times its mass, taking up things that are not alive to make something that is alive. So we took mass.
But it is already alive, and it comes already from something which is alive, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it comes from something that's alive. There's absolutely a continuous living thing.
Right.
And you were saying, how does matter become alive? And I have the example of non-living matter becoming the bulk majority of a living thing. So
well, you have basically two problems, Sully. You have basically the problem of abiogenesis, of how non-living matter could have become the first living thing, and then
that's a problem, definitely.
Right, and then the thing how that became conscious. That are two separate scientific problems which are unsolved.
Yes,
and if I include, there are three big actually scientific problems. One is the origin of the universe, the second is the origin of life, and the third is the origin of consciousness. These are three big problems which science doesn't have an explanation. Now, of course, you can say you just insert God in the gaps, but that's not my line of argumentation.
Okay. Cool. Presuppositions. Let me ask about what those are. Would you like to define what a presupposition means?
Well, I mean, in apologetics, you can start with the presupposition that God exists,
Yes.
and I mean, I can use it. These are two opposed approaches to the one which I am commonly using,
Hmm.
which is the evidential approach, where I start with observing the natural world and then try to make sense of it and to come to an inference, to a logical conclusion, to what best explains the phenomena which we observe. And that's what I am commonly like. Now, I think that the presup approach is also a good approach,
Hmm.
and saying that God is warranted to be presupposed by seeing that the contrary is not possible.
Okay, so you can presuppose a thing by determining the impossibility of the contrary.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm interested. For me, a presupposition is something that I take on before I do things, and if it's something that I would ever derive, I'd pull it out of the presupposition bucket and put it into the derived conclusion bucket.
Yeah, I
Would that
mean, I think that atheists, there are some which say we all are born as atheists, right?
mm,
And I mean, the default position of an atheist is that God either he disbelieves that God exists, or he takes an agnostic standpoint where he doesn't make any positive affirmation and
right?
doesn't take any stand whatsoever and say, I'm agnostic, I simply don't know, I try to convince me,
Yeah,
right?
I think I was born agnostic and then became theist as soon as I believed and understood what my parents told me.
Yeah, that is
Yeah,
that happened with me as well too.
I I I became a believer in God because my parents told me, and at the time, I think that was the best epistemology I had. If your parents say it's true, trust them, believe them. They are correct.
Yeah, I've
Versus
not
when you're 7
been.
or 8, then you find out they're full of shit. But
Yeah. I mean, I really didn't base my start of believing in a solid
Mhm.
epistemological framework. I just went through personal problems. I was depressive as a teenager and looked for a way out, and seeking out to God, starting to pray, and that worked for me, and that was my starting point. Of
Good.
course, it's later on then. I mean, I am not for no reason after 37 years still a Christian.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I was hearing from earlier that at 18 you have a real strong line in the sand where you took on your current views. Uh,
Yes, I converted with 18, and from there on,
it took
I
a
knew
long
what
time
I
for me
was.
to deconvert. I can't nail it down to a date. It was more like, well, there was all these incidents in about over 18 months or something. So it's something that should probably ordinarily take a long time if it ever does. In either
Hmm.
direction. Although some people talk about an instant shift toward believing in God, um, more often than I hear about an instant drop. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not that's
No,
not.
I've heard many atheists saying that it was a process. It wasn't something which it made finger click and then they became an atheist, but it was deconstruction and struggling. But what I very often also see, Dali, is that many have not developed a solid epistemological framework to actually investigate origins.
Mhm,
And when you watch what atheists say, it is 90% or 95% all because the Bible is full of genocide and
mhm,
slavery, and God is a homophobe, and there are so many contradictions, and there is no evidence for God, and all these kind of lines of reasoning.
mhm,
And my standard answer to that is um, I see only one um, good justification to be an atheist,
mm,
and that would be if an atheist can provide um, positive evidence and a substitution for a powerful, eternal, intelligent creator, a mechanism which is more case adequate to explain our existence.
mhm.
And I've never seen any atheist providing such an alternative mechanism.
Yeah, yeah. I'll address the question and not answer it later in a few
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah,
Uh,
sure.
but I will address the question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's see. How much you talk about a fine tuning argument? You talk about there was about 4 different things that were the core of your
Yeah,
presentation.
I started with beauty.
Yeah, beauty,
Then
fine.
I said that truth can only exist if you presuppose the stability of the universe, that
Okay, can
that
I
you
induce
can
that?
trust your sense perception, that you're able to think logically,
Mm-hmm.
and
Can I induce those things?
yeah, you need all to have first all these things to be capable to be conscious, using language, using logic, to
Mhm.
have sense perceptions which are trustworthy, and you need a universe which is stable. These are
Yeah.
all preconditions in order for us to make truth claims, and all these, in my understanding, presuppose a creator.
Okay. If I don't deduce, if I don't assume, if I don't presuppose, maybe I'm not sure which is the right term for that for example, the universe is consistent over time. Maybe that was the first assumption. If I don't assume that, can I observe it and induce it and come to a conclusion that it's probably true without asserting that I know it's true?
Well, the thing is that we experience a universe which is predictable, which is stable. I guess you expect that the sun will be the same tomorrow as it was today and it was yesterday, and we don't experience a chaotic environment, but stability, which permits us to make predictions and to sense and understand things which
Mhm.
happen in the universe. And that requires some preconditions, which, in my understanding, they are not simply a given, they need an explanation.
Hmm. Hmm. If I'm just gonna like wake up like I'm suddenly a baby and I start recognizing that the world stays the same from day to day. Is it reasonable for me to assume that probably tomorrow will be similar to the past days that I've observed without
Yes, that's what I
having an
just said.
explanation? Can I
Yeah, you
still
don't,
operate?
well, you don't need an explanation for that, okay?
Okay.
But when we are starting to actually try to understand why that is so, then I think that then it comes to these questions: how is it explainable that the universe is stable and predictable?
Okay. So now it gets me down to the main thing I'd like to define: explanatory power. I think that was one of the keywords in the thing that you asked me to write my part for and what you're presenting on. Could you define for me explanatory power?
Yeah, I think there are basically two competing worldviews,
Hmm.
two buckets. And in these two buckets, you can put in one, there is one ingredient which is very relevant and a big contrast, which is intelligence.
Hmm.
And in the other bucket, there is no intelligence. And
Intelligence, no intelligence.
right, exactly.
Ah,
And
oh,
what
okay. So in
and
this is relating to cosmology, how the universe started, whether there was
everything,
intelligence.
I would say all our physical existence
Okay.
has basically two possible competing
So
hypotheses of
it's about
how
the origin.
everything
Is
started.
the origin intelligent or not? That's the
Right. Is the cause, is the mechanism which explains our existence intelligent
hmm
or not intelligent?
hmm okay.
So I would say that all those which disbelieve that God exists, there is that bucket where there is no intelligence. And in the other, you can put whatever kind of God, you can put farting pixies, whatever you
hmm
want, it doesn't matter. But the key ingredient is intelligence.
Okay. So the key distinction between those worldviews is whether the origin had an intelligent backing or was
Right.
a,
Yeah.
a not intelligently designed.
Yeah, if there was an intelligent designer or not.
Okay. Yeah, intelligent design or not. Sure, that works.
Mhm.
Can you give me your chain for now? You've given me several good reasons. Like you've said, beauty that we see beauty shows that there's an intelligence that makes things that are beautiful because that's intelligence showing through the design to intelligence. Maybe a lesser intelligence, but still it's the perceiver of the beauty is intelligent. And so by that association, you say the origin has to have had beauty in mind. Am I getting that right?
The key issue here is that the fact that we can recognize what is beauty, what is beautiful, that isn't a given. That isn't just a free lunch. It has to have an explanation. Why are we equipped with a mind and with senses that are able to distinguish what we perceive as being beautiful and what is being ugly?
Okay. Why are we able to see beauty and ugliness? Why do we have a notion even of beauty or
Yeah,
ugliness?
yeah,
Okay. And that's
exactly.
an indication of intelligence.
That is,
All right.
that is, in my understanding, evidence that there has to be someone that created us that has that sense of beauty, which has been able to create beauty and made beings with the same equipment, sensorial and mental equipment to recognize his creation.
Would that apply to, first of all, I guess, do bees find flowers beautiful? Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, certainly they know how to find those which they want to pollinize and so forth. Now, if they have the sense perception that they are beautiful or not, that's not something that I know.
Okay. So don't know about bees' perception of beauty. Okay. I wonder if flowers find bees beautiful. Now I'm just going off on a tangent. Never mind that. Okay, so we've got beauty. We've got which of those is the most compelling to you?
Of all the arguments which I provided to you,
Yeah.
I would say that the fine-tune argument of the universe and in biochemistry is very powerful. Now I see someone asking in the chat if we all perceive beauty in the same sense. No, of course not. I mean, there are degrees of someone can maybe think that the painting is beautiful, another one thinks it's not. But I think we can trace some kind of path, I would say, maybe, or I mean, if you see a Mandarin duck, then I would say that a large majority of people seeing it would consider it as something beautiful.
Yeah, I like birds a lot. So yes,
Yeah.
birds are beautiful, no doubt. Okay. You were saying something like the fine tuning in combination could be, they had to be within 1 to 5%, something like that. So 1% of the universes that could exist would support life. Is that about right?
Well, the fine-tuned parameters to have actually even a universe and more than that, being able to have atoms, and then in the end, the element table, which there is carbon, which also requires fine-tuning, and then stars and planets and so forth, is much
like being able to jump from lithium to carbon in a star directly without doing the intervening stuff. That has to be fine-tuned so we can have carbon.
Yeah, the carbon, there is fine-tuning, which is Hoyle's resonance, which is to get carbon in the stars. That's a finely adjusted process, and then from there to go to the heavier elements.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'd have to find some other direction to get to carbon if carbon was an important thing to do. Sure.
Right. They also do deuterium to go from helium, from the lightest elements to build it up. That's also, there are some difficult steps there.
So I'm going to imagine there's somebody standing over there who says, Aha. Fine-tuning is an argument against your God, because if your God could create life in a universe not fine-tuned to allow life, that would be proof of God. But God just producing life in a universe fine-tuned for life means you can't distinguish God from nature.
Yeah, this is an argument which I've
It's a
seen that.
heckler over there, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are some that come up. Well, if your God is omnipotent, then he should be able to even create life in a
Sure.
non-fine-tuned universe, right?
It would be
But
more proof for God, right? If we were in a universe hostile to life.
the problem with this is, um, if I am telling you I have a specific goal, for example, to create a car, can you create a car with all its functionalities just with one atom?
I would certainly bet against it.
Just
I'm
with
not
one
sure of
atom?
exactly the list of functionalities for a car, but my first thought is certainly no. It's not.
Right.
There's no
So,
complexity.
so I see it the same with God. He could not create all the complexity which is in the universe
Ah,
just with one sort of an atom or just with one atom. So,
right.
certain things, certain conditions have to be met. So
Okay.
God isn't.
You needed the
I
whole
mean,
richness of
yeah,
at
the
least
the
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 first
term
third of
that
the periodic table or something.
yeah the term that God is omni powerful, or all powerful, this is something that has to be defined. What is meant by that? He cannot do anything. He can do what is possible. Also, he cannot do illogical things. He cannot lie and say the truth at the same time, or create a square circle or things like that.
Okay. I want to end on my hypotheticals. If you hypothetically learned that fine tuning was a much better argument, would it change your mind at all?
If it would be a much better argument,
Yeah. What if the fine tuning were just way more fine than you thought, or there was even more reason to believe that fine tuning was very specific to pointing at your God?
well, I think the more fine tuning is required to have a life permitting universe, Dali, the
Hmm.
more this points to the necessity of a fine tuner.
Okay. So the answer would be yes. It would increase your confidence.
Yes.
Okay. How about the other direction? You knew that was coming. How about the other direction? What if you found that fine tuning wasn't nearly as good an argument because there was an alternate explanation, or maybe the fine tuning was much less fine than you were thinking? Would that lower your confidence?
Well, I think it has to do with probability. The less um, probable that an event is, the less it is possible that a random cause was involved. But the more fine-tuned, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think if you get what I'm saying, the more fine-tuned something is, the more improbable
Mm-hmm.
that situation is, and the more that points to a fine-tuner.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the less fine-tuned that
And that would
something
raise
is,
your confidence. Yeah.
yeah,
So
if
it's
there
nice
would
to know
be
that this
just
would move your confidence in both directions.
if there would be just one parameter which is fine-tuned, then it is more likely that eventually just an unguided process instantiated that fine-tuning.
Yeah. I like the fine tuning argument because it invokes two of my favorite epistemologies: being able to count things and being able to categorize things clearly.
Hmm.
Those count a lot for me for the way I think of truth. So good on you on the fine tuning argument. I have no further questions. Is there anything further? Any other questions that you would have liked me to ask, or any ones that you want to grab from the comments, or anything else before we do the second half?
Now, maybe we can go to the second half. You can make your presentation and I'll question you on it afterwards.
Cool. Let me pull that up. Let's see. I'm going to change my windows around just slightly so that I can read while still looking close, at least close to the camera. All right. I love seeing you on Pine Creek yesterday. That was fun. Thanks for presenting your thing. I promise that I completely wrote this before. None of what Nathan or Pine Creek said influenced what I wrote here.
Okay.
No matter whether, although we do cover some of the same ground.
Okay.
Part 0, thesis. Explanatory power of a model of reality is improved when we are able to make reliable predictions about observations where we don't already know the answer. We can tell that our hypothesis, so that we can tell that our hypothesis is not just ad hoc to fit the data. The scientific worldview has better explanatory power than any other alternate worldview so far because of its ability to predict and test within our physical universe. Such is the predictive power of science that as it has progressed throughout history, it has diminished and in some cases eliminated altogether the need for God's influence as a reliance or explanation of our universe. Indeed, the scientific knowledge possessed by a modern high school graduate would seem divinely inspired and godlike to our ancestors 2,000 years ago. This power comes not from an understanding of God, but from an understanding of basic high school maths and standing on the shoulders of giants. Part 1, History. Please pardon all the name dropping and obvious jargon. You don't have to know about these people or details about the science to understand the points made, so just relax. None of this is on the test. Isaac Newton found that an apple and the moon are pulled down by the same thing and had to invent calculus to work out the details of orbital mechanics, leading to the maths that NASA uses for interplanetary probes and militaries use to aim their guns. Hecklers will yell that Newton was a right bastard that died as a virgin due to his personality. That is correct. Critics will say that Newton didn't invent calculus, at least not alone. Ever heard of Leibniz? Never mind that, it's besides the point. At the time, the default idea about the motion of the planets was that God, or angels directed by God, pushed them along. Because most everyone for 2,000 years trusted that Aristotle had it right, nobody could predict where a missile would land except by trial and error, until Newton managed practical ballistics. Does that mean that Newton contributed to more deaths by artillery than Haber did with mass production of explosives? Sorry, getting off topic. Scratch that bit. Notably, Newton did not remove God from his model. He just reduced God's role to occasionally adjusting things for it to remain stable. Turns out Newton was wrong in even this allowance for divine intervention. Newton discovered greater explanatory power by reducing God's influence in his model. Pierre-Simon Laplace, a century later, managed to exclude even God's occasional nudges, leading Napoleon to ask how Laplace could publish on the solar system without reference to God. Laplace responded that he had no need of that hypothesis, and Napoleon replied that God is a fine hypothesis. It explains many things. History has concluded that Napoleon was wrong and Laplace was right about needing God in models of cosmology. Laplace discovered greater explanatory power by eliminating God's influence in his model. Antoine Lavoisier was an accountant and tax collector, granted a monopoly from the king to oppress the citizenry of Paris, and later lost his head over his political abuse. Many today believe he got what he deserved for being such a tool. In the years before that revolution, Lavoisier, obsessed on a hobby of measuring everything before and after chemical reactions, disproving phlogiston and demonstrating that mass is conserved. This discovery revolutionized chemistry by getting rid of ideas that seemed so obvious to so many for so long. Lavoisier discovered greater explanatory power by finding a precise quantifiable model and rejecting a vague qualitative model. Modern science uses a philosophy of knowledge called methodological naturalism, where only that which can be observed, tested, replicated, and verified can be used to obtain knowledge of what is real. Science had an impressive track record of future testable predictions, so good that the methods of science are used to check every other way of knowing things. Science has the greatest explanatory power of any method learned so far. If you or anyone can find a way to make future testable predictions using a theory that necessarily includes supernatural components, you should win a Nobel Prize as soon as your contributions are properly recognized. If that happens, I hope you will allow me to say I knew you win. Science does not say God does not exist, but instead says God is not a necessary hypothesis, as God does not add any explanatory power. Part 2. I don't know. Everywhere we look, if we look far enough, we find a horizon beyond which we cannot observe. Ours is a finite realm in every possible direction: big, small, old, fast, and heavy. We cannot see, and according to our understanding, cannot ever see. We don't know anything about the other sides of those horizons. The oldest photons we can see are about 14 billion years old, the cosmic microwave background radiation left over when the visible universe cooled down enough to become transparent. We cannot see anything older than that, so anything we say about the speculative Big Bang event that cosmologists speculate happened 380,000 years before the CMBR is, I repeat, speculation. It's neat that we have a model of that time before the horizon, and there is no way for us to check the model against observations. That model currently includes an inflationary epoch where the speed limit of light was broken for maybe a billionth of a second, so something seems wrong and hand-wavy. We have to admit that mostly we don't know. I'm not a cosmologist. I might be wrong. I don't know. Come at me, scientists. I'll try to be convincible. The smallest things we can see are in high-energy particle accelerators, and those things are several orders of magnitude larger than the smallest things that our models can even theoretically see, the Planck length. Smaller than that, we just don't know. We can't know, according to the model. Now, the model could be wrong, but the standard model of particle physics has spectacular explanatory power and might be wrong, but only by a tiny little bit. The predictions of the standard model already match empirical observations to better than parts per billion. Wait, what was that? A W boson? Sorry, getting distracted. Back to the point. Anything that might supersede the standard model would have to be at least as good at predicting reality, leaving the standard model at least a very useful approximation. It might be wrong like Newton was wrong, while pretty damn close. Only the most rarefied nerds use general relativity or quantum theory in their day jobs. Almost everyone can use Newton and be close enough for government work like those sloppy, imprecise NASA probes. Last and far from least, Heisenberg taught me that the more I know about momentum, the less I can know about position. The principle is that I can't know, so I don't know. Deciding that I do know, beyond my ability to observe, is a bad strategy, because I will be wrong in the vast majority of the possibilities, and if I'm somehow right, it's only because I'm a broken clock. Broken clocks have no predictive capability, and therefore, no explanatory power. Thanks to many who helped me with this composition: Nye, Kimberly Foyle, Gomeo, Michael, Nathan Thinsbox, and Gina. Otangelo, the show is yours. You may interview. I hear you muted.
Yes. Do you want me to interview you, or would you like that I just give you an answer to a few things that you just said?
You may choose. You may do both if you like.
Okay,
This is your
so I'll address a few things that you said. So let me read here from a narrative which I don't know if it is actually true about Isaac Newton, but I think it may be appropriate to what you just said. Sir Isaac had an accomplished artisan fashioned for him a small-scale model of our solar system, which was to be put in a room in Newton's home when completed. The assignment was finished and installed on a large table. The workman had done a very commendable job, simulating not only the various sizes of the planets and their relative proximities, but also so constructing the model that everything rotated and orbited when a crank was turned. It was an interesting, even fascinating work, as you can imagine, particularly to anyone schooled in the sciences. Newton's atheist scientist friend came by for a visit. Seeing the model, he was naturally intrigued and proceeded to examine it with undisguised admiration for the high quality of the workmanship. "My, what an exquisite thing this is!" he exclaimed. "Who made it?" Paying little attention to him, Sir Isaac answered, "Nobody." Stopping his inspection, the visitor turned and said, "Evidently, you did not understand my question. I asked, who made this?" Newton, enjoying himself immensely, no doubt, replied in a still more serious tone, "Nobody. What you see just happened to assume the form it now has." "You must think I am a fool," the visitor retorted heatedly. "Of course somebody made it, and he is a genius, and I would like to know who he is." Newton then spoke to his friend in a polite yet firm way. "This thing is but a puny imitation of a much grander system whose laws you know, and I am not able to convince you that this mere toy is without a designer or a maker, yet you profess to believe that the great original from which the design is taken has come into being without either designer or maker. Now tell me, by what sort of reasoning do you reach such an incongruous conclusion?" So I think this is funny thing to narrate what they said.
Am I understanding the story right that in this case Newton was atheist?
No, his visitor
No,
was an
his
atheist.
visitor was atheist.
Yes, and came
Oh,
to visit his
and,
home
and
where
Newton was the
this
theist who
model
was saying,
was.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
now I understand. Okay, yes, because I agree. Newton was a theist.
So obviously, when he saw the model, his visitor, atheist, he knew immediately some fine artist
Sure.
made that object, right?
Yeah,
So
clockwork.
yeah, right. So Newton questioned how is it that he believes that this artifact, which displays obvious design, required a designer, and the real thing, which is the sun and the planets and so forth surrounding the sun, didn't require a designer. That's basically the moral of the story.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. Yeah, I agree. I think that's what Newton would think.
Right.
He still had God in his model.
Right. And I think this is an argument which I very frequently use, which is an analogy. And there is a scientist, actually it was even Newton who said that. Let me quick quote it to you. He said, "To the same natural effects, we must, as far as possible, assign the same causes." But better described it is by William Herschel, that analogy argument. If the analogy of two phenomena be very close and striking, while at the same time the cause of one is very obvious, it becomes scarcely possible to refuse to admit the action of an analogous cause in the other, tough not so obvious in itself.
So some analogies are just too compelling.
Yes, if you, for example, see a complex factory and you don't know who made that factory, then you know that humans with all their intelligence, they make factories for specific purposes,
Yes.
right? But in an analogous sense, the cell is a chemical factory, which also makes all the chemical parts which then it uses itself, the basic building blocks. So there is an analogy here. If we as intelligent beings are required to make a chemical factory for specific purposes, then we have an analogous situation where in nature we also see a chemical factory, but we don't know the cause. So the evidence, what is the path to the cause. So if we don't know what the cause is, but we have analogous causes in the human world, then it is a logical inference to say, okay, if a factory which we can come to the conclusion that human intelligence had to made it, and the cell factory is also analogously a factory of chemicals, of building bricks and blocks, then it is a logical inference to say that the cell also required an intelligent cause.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I see your argument from analogy, and I recognize its potential strength, and I am uncompelled by it. But that's hardly surprising to you, I'm sure.
Yeah. So you talked about epistemology and the strength of the scientific method.
Yes.
I think that goes to regards of epistemology. How can we what kind of evidence should we seek in order to come to solid conclusions in regards of origins? And I agree that the scientific method, it gives us good explanations in regards of how things work. We can come up with scientific hypothesis, then test it and see if what we predicted actually, in fact, will happen. And then we have the cause, and we have our prediction confirmed. And what I see very often is that we can test natural causes, but we cannot put God into a test tube because it is supposedly a supernatural entity.
Right.
And my answer to that, Dali, is that we don't even need to make such predictions, because I gave you a prime example where we already know by our own experience that we as intelligent beings, we are able to instantiate certain things to which we have no evidence whatsoever that non-intelligent mechanisms are capable to instantiate the same state of affairs. So intelligence is already confirmed to be able to do certain things which we can observe in nature, like, as I said previously, a self-replicating chemical factory, which is a cell.
Yeah, I think that one's arguing from what we don't know. I think that's saying we don't know how to do it, therefore, and so I'm not compelled by that one.
No, I would say it's the opposite, Dolly. It is an inference to the best explanation, where I am saying that we know by our own experience that we are capable to instantiate chemical factories. Okay, so this is something that we already know by our own experience, and when we see
chemical factories, therefore,
yes,
so and of course, my parents made me, but I don't think that's what you mean. I think it's like,
no, that's not what I mean. No, what I am saying is that we know that we as intelligent beings, we are capable to use our intelligence to create chemical factories for a specific purpose.
Okay.
Right?
If I had a termite mound, what would you say about that? Is that a factory built by intelligence?
Let's keep to the cell factory, because I think we have an analogous situation here. So, Paul Davies is a very well-known physicist, and he made a very concise description of what life is. And he said life is chemistry and information.
So are computers that are not alive.
No, of course, computers are not alive. But he said in regards of life or cells, cells are a composition of chemicals and information. So what does he mean by that?
Defines life, because things outside of life fit the definition. I think it's an incomplete definition. I think it's a description of things that are part of life, but it doesn't define.
Yeah, he is not talking about spiritual life, because of course you can say a spirit, disembodied mind is alive, but he is talking about living, self-replicating cells.
Right.
Okay.
So like bacteria, plants, us. Yes.
Yes, the chemical. It is composed of chemicals. Okay, of the building blocks of the cell, but there is also another component, which is information.
Okay.
And you know that genes, they store information which directs the making of the self and how to operate it. Okay, so there is an analogy here.
That's the nut.
Right. So there is an analogy here between I mean, I am as my profession is machine designer, so I design machines as profession. So first I sit to the drawing table, to the drawing board, and then I will put all the sizes and materials and so forth and the parts. I will make the blueprint of that machine, and that blueprint goes to the factory, and there it is made. Right?
Yes.
And that is analogous what we see in a cell, where the information stored in the gene is the blueprint which directs the making of all the building blocks of the cell and the construction and the operation of the cell.
Yep. A 6-bit code with 64 possibilities down to 22 amino acids and some stop codons, some things with the UV option, an alternate way of spelling. Yes, that.
Yeah, that's the language. That's the
like
each colon is a word. Where there is a mapping of 64 codons to 20 amino acids, so there is an assignment. Yeah, there's in some cases it's 22. But so we have an analogous situation here, where we know that we as human beings, we make blueprints that then direct the making of chemical factories, and analogously we have a blueprint or information which is instructional and complex, which is stored in genes, which directs the making of cells. So the question is, what explains that state of affairs best? And science is working on this for 70, 80 years, and it hasn't come to explain anything. Neither the origin of the building blocks is explained by science, and also where the initial information came from to make the first cell. Science doesn't have an explanation. Also in regard,
we don't have the abiogenesis step, but darn, are we good at everything that came after. Everything that came after, we've got so nailed down that there's
don't actually
edges of unknown.
Yeah, we don't actually daily. I'm studying also evolution, and what I can tell you in simple terms is that the make of complex multicellular organisms is not just instantiated by information which is stored in genes, but also on an epigenetic level and signaling pathways. And I've collected so far almost 50 different languages and epigenetic codes.
Yeah, I agree.
And they work
pieces on a chessboard and their moves. You also have to have the board, no doubt.
So yeah, and they work in an integrated, complex fashion together. And
Mhm.
that is something which either it is an all or nothing business. And this is a big problem
Wait,
for evolutionary theory.
it's
I can
all or
give you an
nothing, but we
example.
have millions of species who do it slightly differently.
No,
So,
that's not what I am talking about. Let me
oh,
explain. For example, we have in eukaryotic cells a spliceosome, which splits
yeah.
the genes, and there is a splicing code which directs the split of these genes.
Mhm.
So you have there as well a software and a hardware component.
Yes.
Okay, and of course the question then is, what came first, the spliceosome, which is actually the most complex protein complex in eukaryotic cells, or
Okay.
the splicing code, which then is used to split the genes in exons and introns where it is actually required. And you can have, for example, 300 different protein species upon just one gene, if you put it at the right place. But
Yep.
the cell needs to know where to split it at the right place.
Well, a spliceosome is going to work on a specific set of GATCCs, whatever those things are. It's going to find a specific one of those
Right.
that can do its thing.
Yeah.
I'm probably talking about CRISPR when I'm talking about this, CRISPR being just an example of a spliceosome. Is that right?
Yes, CRISPR is a tool which
Yeah.
they use to actually cut DNA.
Right.
Right.
And it's only going to cut it between certain thises and that's.
Yeah, they have methods to know where they have to cut it. But the thing is that you can actually read the gene in 6 different ways. There are you can read it forward, backwards. You have 3
Right.
different reading frames. So there is complexity above complexity.
Yeah, I think I've only heard of like some viruses who actually use it where they encode genes off that 3-letter codon, but everything else just stays on the 3-letter codon. And if you cut it anywhere else, it just dies.
And not only that, you have actually viruses which have a different genetic alphabet.
That makes sense.
And of course, and viruses, they do not share a common ancestor.
Viruses don't share a common ancestor.
No, they don't share a common ancestor.
Okay.
And life depends on viruses. Otherwise, if there would be a world just without viruses, we would die in 2 days.
Okay, yeah. Viruses are endemic and required, and in some cases, what do we call it? Not parasitic, but symbiotic. Is that the claim?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. Viruses are here and they're here to stay.
So the thing is, you cannot have life without viruses, but you cannot have viruses without life.
I bet you could have simple life without viruses.
No, viruses are not alive, and they depend on a host to replicate.
I'm saying that the other way. I'm saying that you could probably have yeast in your beer without any viruses.
I don't know in regards of that specific case which you're telling.
The only example I'm giving for yeast in beer is it's a monoculture. It's only got one kind of life in the whole project. No other life's allowed. Otherwise, it would ruin the beer.
Yeah, the problem here is that it's called Miller's ratchet. If you have just one kind of phylogenetic life form, then it will actually devolve and die. So you need actually diversity, and you need viruses which share with horizontal gene transfer. They share genes amongst them, and you need that sharing of genes from the beginning.
Nature, sure, because the virus has to actually compete in everything else. If I give it a beer vat full of food that is sterilized otherwise, then it will not make better yeast in the long run. It's not going to evolve. It's not going to this. It's just going to eat all the food and then die and give me beer.
You have actually 2 big problems.
Totally dead end, but I do claim it's alive for at least a while. Go ahead.
You have basically 2 problems. If you are talking about the RNA world, then you have the eigenthreshold, which means you need a certain complexity in order to have self-replication. And if you don't go past that complication, that size and complexity, you cannot have self-replication. That is the eigenparadox, and it's a big problem for the RNA world. But let's suppose that you even overcome that hurdle, and let's suppose that you have a first progenote which starts to self-replicate. If you don't have variety, genetic variety, and the population where they can actually start having horizontal gene transfer and mix their genes, then it will happen what I just told you. The population would die in a short period of time. So that's why actually viruses and all these elements, they are necessary. Like transposable elements and
So
mobile
you're saying
elements.
that abiogenesis is easier if viruses are part of it?
You need viruses.
You have to have viruses. You couldn't have abiogenesis without viruses?
No. And the hypothesis is that viruses, they originated prior to life starting. The problem is just how do you explain
it's like saying electric cars started before batteries were invented. That doesn't make any sense. How do you get a virus to go through its life cycle if it doesn't have life to be parasitic on?
Yeah, that's the big scientific problem. It's a catch-22 or chicken and egg problem. What came first, life or viruses? And the truth is that you need both to start everything. Otherwise, it's not possible. And I mean, you see, for me as a theist and a creationist, I have a plausible explanation which satisfies me, which is that God created everything. Right, exactly. Yeah. That God, and I mean, also common ancestry has many problems, which I've listing at least 10 different problems why common ancestry is most likely not true. And that adds even more to the fact that viruses do not have a common ancestor. Now that multiplies the problem of life coming to existence without a directing agent, because even to have just one life form, it is extremely unlikely by unguided evidence.
I am so rarely convinced by arguments that proclaim to say something's probability is almost astronomically low, 1 over ridiculously large numbers.
Yeah, I can give you another aspect.
They just fall, they fall so flat for me.
I can give you another aspect.
Sure.
To have an amino acid chain, to have a protein of 100 amino acids, the odds are 1 to 10 to the 130th power. That is more than the number of atoms in the universe, because you have 100 positions, and in each position you need to select amongst 20 different amino acids to have the one which then conveys functionality when the entire chain is constructed. Now,
2 decks of cards. Shuffle them together enough, and I have 10 to the 167th power potential combinations.
Yes, but the thing is, you want a specified complex sequence which in the end will convey you function. Yeah, but in case of proteins, yes, because you have a huge sequence space, but amongst this 1 to 10 to the 130th power of possible sequences, you have just a few which then will convey you functionality. And that's what we have to find. And that's the big problem.
I am not at all convinced that there are only 22, you said, amino acids, exact sequences of proteins that could ever have functionality.
Well, the thing is that you need a specified complex sequence of amino acids in order for them to fold and then eventually convey a function. But I mean, the problem is
22.
No, we are not 22 are the different amino acids where you have to choose from to put it in the sequence.
22 out of 10 to the 100 and something power. And my answer is, why do we think that only 22 proteins are possible?
I think you are conflating amino acids with proteins. Amino acids are the building blocks
You're right.
of proteins, right? So
right. And we've only got like 22 that are functional, right?
It could be a different amino acid alphabet, basically, because
Right.
because the composition, it is optimal to have functionality like hydrophobicity. Some are polar, others are non-polar. Some are used in the pocket inside of the protein. Other amino acids are used in the outside because they are hydrophilic. They love water. The inside pocket is water hating, and so forth.
Yeah.
But
soap bubbles, excellent way to sort things.
Right. So I actually told about this in my introduction about the optimal amino acid set to have proteins which then convey functionality. And they did test, I think it was 100 million different possible amino acids. And the set that is used in life is amongst 16 other, 6 different sequences. It is the best one in regards of 3 different aspects, which are favorable for having proteins. So the question is, of course, since you don't have natural selection prebiotically, how was the optimal set or alphabet of amino acids selected?
Wait, we don't have natural selection prior to reproduction?
No.
Ooh. That almost requires its own show.
Yeah.
I'll have to check on that, because I think
I can get the link
about natural selection in terms of actual like death and evolution. Maybe I can agree, but I think if I'm saying sorting things based on its chemical properties and those areas where the gradient is such that a chemical cycle can occur, I think that is a kind of natural selection prior to life.
Well, first of all, you need the right building blocks. I'm putting here a link which you can please put in the side chat, which gives precisely that answer: the possible mechanisms to explain the origin of life.
Okay, copy link address. Okay, there's the link. Okay, and that one is telling us. Tell me what it says again. What is the claim?
Well,
I was copying and
in order
pasting.
to, you need basically 3 things in order to have life. One is energy. The second is the building blocks, and the third is information. Okay. And since we were talking about the building blocks, there is another big problem of abiogenesis, which is rarely being considered, and that is structure space. What does that mean? On a prebiotic Earth, there was basically an unlimited number of different molecules existing on the surface of the Earth. But you need 4 specific macromolecules, which are complex, that are used in life.
Okay.
I
need 4 specific. Are we talking about GATC?
No, these are the nucleobases. We are talking about phospholipids, amino acids, nucleotides, and carbohydrates.
Okay.
But there was no natural selection which sorted out these macromolecules, and they have to be concentrated at one place, and they have to be purified.
Would those natural conditions occur in a volcanic vent?
Well, the problem is in volcanic vents that you don't have the concentration of these building blocks. They are very dilute. And there is the same problem. How do you concentrate them in a vent? How do you purify them? And then we are talking here about complex molecules. Nucleotides are made of phosphate, ribose, and the nucleobases, and they have to be joined together. And water actually hydrolyzes these bonds. So they disintegrate. So that's another big problem.
Yeah, the things that you're speaking, let's see, it would be for you're way past my knowledge level, and so I'm stuck with, okay, here's you saying these things, and here's PhD scientists in the field saying these things, and if I were to try to break the tie, I think their ability to describe things and make future testable predictions puts them higher, I think, when I don't understand. You follow? I'm not educated enough to even judge whether information in the terms that you're using is even relevant. I don't know.
Well, I can give you just an example here. Okay. When we are talking about the origin of genetic code, I think you have a pretty good grasp what this is about, right? So there are 3 nucleotide codons which are assigned to 20 amino acids.
Yes.
Right. So there is an assignment which we can use again an analogous situation where we can say that the word SOS means I need help. So if you go to an island, if you fly over an island, and then you look down to the island and you see there a sign SOS and someone waving at you, then you know someone has stranded there, had a shipwreck and something like that. That means I need help, right? So the same is in regards of, for example, AUG, which is a start codon, which instructs the ribosome machinery here start to translate the messenger RNA. So this is AUG, uracil. That's the uracil base.
I'm only familiar with a GAT and a C. The U is an alternate.
Because thymine is in DNA and uracil is in RNA. And since we are talking about
so the RNA side. Got it.
Yeah, since we are talking about messenger RNA, so it's uracil. So that sequence, adenine, uracil, and guanine means start translating the sequence.
Okay. Yep.
So you have
here's the beginning of the zipper. Now,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you have a meaning there. You have a meaning. This AUG sign means start translation.
Yes, it is the actual tool that is attracted by the
tRNA.
Whatever is the enzyme that does the thing.
It's the tRNA and
key that fits that.
Exactly.
Thing.
Yeah, you have the tRNA and you have the amino acid tRNA synthetase, which then grasps the amino acid and inserts on the tRNA, and then it goes to the polymerization.
The meaning of those bumps is let me in my door.
Yeah, exactly. So you asked me, well, what do the PhD scientists say in the origin of these things, right? So let me read here from
every
Eugene
time I hear them, they
Koonin.
say, "We're not sure. We don't know. We have a bunch of possibilities." Go ahead.
Yeah, I will read you what he reads here in regards of the origin of the genetic code. In our opinion, despite extensive and in many cases elaborate attempts to model code optimization, ingenious theorizing along the lines of the coevolution theory and considerable experimentation, very little definitive progress has been made. Summarizing the state of the art in the study of the code evolution, we cannot escape considerable skepticism. It seems that the two-pronged fundamental question, why is the genetic code the way it is, and how did it come to be, that was asked over 50 years ago at the dawn of molecular biology, might remain pertinent even in another 50 years. Our consolation is that we cannot think of a more fundamental problem in biology.
Okay.
So if you go, I mean, I think I told you previously, I am actually writing a book on abiogenesis.
I look
And
forward
to
to
do
reading it.
Yeah, and to do so, I read a lot of scientific papers which deal with the questions of the origin of RNA, DNA,
Mhm,
origin of the code, origin of the information, origin of phospholipids, all this kind of stuff. And
mhm.
what I can tell you is that basically every relevant question that is asked in regards of the origin of each of these things will
Mhm.
end with basically either ignorance or baseless speculation.
Okay. Yeah, baseless speculation. Sounds like cosmology. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm picking on cosmologists today on purpose, uh, because I think I think way too often people think that they know what they're talking about prior to the CMBR, and that's some fluffy science back there, I think.
I've seen some really wonderful speculation. They have
Yeah.
a very fertile imagination about certain things there.
Yep. 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 Anyway, and they're entertaining for me to read. I'll continue to read cosmologists.
Oh, I do it also all the time, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Shout out to Sabina Hassenfelter, one of
Oh,
my teachers.
I well, I think she is a prime. I'm sorry for saying that, but I
Oh, go
think
ahead.
she fits perfectly what you just described. A lot of
Mhm.
speculation.
Lots of speculation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that mostly I can tell when she's speculating. She signals it well. So that helps. Uh, if if she started talking and I knew she was speculating and she didn't signal it, my trust goes down. Click, click, click. That's what happens for me.
Yeah. So
Also, if somebody
basically,
gives me a reason that is, I think, a bad reason to believe something, then my trust goes down for that. So
yeah. Well,
that happens with my questions. It's bad.
what I am saying is this: if you try to confirm a hypothesis,
Hmm.
and all tracks that you go down to confirm it, they end in a road without an end.
Hmm.
Then there should be a threshold where you say, well, it's time to look somewhere else.
Hmm.
And this is called eliminative induction. And when you have a true dichotomy
Hmm.
and one of the two hypotheses isn't working, then the other by default is true.
If you have a true dichotomy, yeah. If you've only
Yes,
got two choices left,
right.
uh, I don't
Exactly.
believe that mostly. First, I have such a resistance against what do we call it? There's induction, deduction, and abduction. Deduction's where
Right.
you eliminate the possibilities. Induction is where you assume that the patterns that you see will continue, and abduction is choosing the thing that you think is the most likely out of your possibilities.
Yes, and I use
Like
basically
abduction
two.
much, and I mean abduction might be good for a horse race, but not much of anything else. And deduction is so abused by the little twistsies of our language. Ooh, they can prove black as
Yeah,
white.
the thing is, you need somehow to make sense of our um, existence. And you
Hmm.
said, well, I like very much the scientific method.
Hmm.
The thing is that with the scientific method, you cannot investigate the supernatural. You cannot investigate what happened beyond the physical universe.
Right. If you can't observe it, you can't do. Now, if the supernatural has a consistent and predictable effect on the natural, then you should be able to observe something.
And that's what my substantiation of intelligent design is. We can actually observe the signs or the signature of intelligence
Hmm.
in the natural world. And I have 12 distinct points. I can put
Hmm.
link and you can put it in the side chat. How do you recognize um, the signature of past intelligent action? Okay. I've mentioned a
Is the
few
link
things,
you're going
but
to put me?
we don't have enough time. Yes, I will give you the link and you can put it inside chat. It's 12 key points where you can say, aha, this must have been intelligently designed. and random events, they are not capable to instantiate these things.
Okay, so let's see. Copy link address, comments, paste. Okay, and with that, I'm satisfied. Are you satisfied? Is there more that you would like to cover?
Yeah.
You're satisfied.
Up to
Thank you,
I'm
Otangelo.
your guest.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you, and thank you for talking to us about explanatory power and these worldviews. I think we end on a good note. I think on rapport we win. Yes, we're good.
Yeah.
All right. Glad to be able to have conversations across worldviews and hear each other out. That's good enough on its own.
Sure.
Thank you, Otangelo.
Have a good one, everyone.
Everybody.